Be good.
Can you put your camera on, Suzanne, or?
Actually, I can't today, but
That's okay.
yeah.
It's okay. So Suzanne, why are you interested in this topic?
I think that it's an important piece. I mean, digital marketing, we get all excited about metrics. And I think that there's always a lot more to learn. So I saw this and I thought, oh, I'm going to check it out.
All right, good. That's great. Kim, do you want to get started or what do you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
Sorry for my video being off. I'm having a bandwidth issue this morning. My name is Kimberly. I'm the Executive Director of the Micro Business Association of New England. We specialize in training, access to resources, and providing networking opportunities to micro businesses throughout New England. And we're joined today by Beth Carter, who will be providing some training today on assessments for success. And Beth Carter, please take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Just a little bit about me. I am a human capital leadership and development specialist. I am a certified executive business and career coach. I am a corporate trainer. I'm also an adjunct professor. Right now I'm teaching at Bryant University, but I also teach sometimes at Roger Williams University, and through Bristol Community College, I do corporate trainings. I'm doing a lot of work for a bank right now. On top of that, I have a part-time role. I am the executive director of the Rhode Island Business Competition, and that's how Kim and I've gotten to know each other. So assessments are very interesting. So the benefits of assessments really is, not only knowing your strengths, but also your weaknesses. And I don't like the word weakness. I've been an executive recruiter, by the way, for over 35 years. And a lot of times when we're doing interviews or reference checks, that word comes up. And I like to think of it better as areas we can improve upon. None of us are really good at everything. We can't be. And especially as myself and others, as entrepreneurs, I always encourage people to not do it all because it takes up a lot of your time in ways it shouldn't. But there's other things is that we have limitations to our behaviors, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But the whole idea of assessments really is not only being, self-aware, which is very important, but the more self-aware you are, the more that you can be cognizant of how others behave. So the idea is that if you're more aware and you're more aware of others, hopefully it'll make for a better relationship. But a lot of times, our perception of things is different from the way others see it. So I always love this line, there's no such thing as reality. Reality is what you perceive, thus your perception of life is your reality. So the nice thing with these assessments is it's in black and white or color, depending on the assessment, but you could sit down with someone or a team of people and really, go through the results and really understand it better than just working off of your perception. Some of these assessments work very well in team building exercises, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. A lot of times the reason why we get into situations with miscommunications or conflict is, again, that perception piece. So understanding better your behaviors, why you act a certain way, how you act a certain way is always very interesting, because sometimes we don't realize that someone who's very much like us, we can get actually more conflict than others. So I'll give you an example. Back when my oldest son, I have 3 children, my oldest son was in high school, he took one of the assessments we're going to talk about in a little bit, and he left his results on my kitchen table. And I went upstairs to my office and looked, and I said, my goodness, it's so true. I've always said that Matt looks like my ex-husband, but acts like me. And we had the exact same 4 letters. This was the Myers-Briggs. So when I realized that things that upset him and some of the ways he behaves are exactly the same that I do. And so I know I've learned better to when to back off on him on certain things and when I can push a little bit, because it's the same way I want to be treated. So even in a personal relationship, assessments are always beneficial. Of course, a lot of this in the workplace, of course, includes increasing productivity and efficiency. And again, if you look at any articles on leadership, you will know that those leaders that are very transparent, authentic, and credible, meaning that people trust them, are the best leaders. So the ones that I'm going to go into more depth about are these three. I am actually a DISC expert. I'm not as well versed, I'm going to be honest with you, about Myers-Briggs and the 360, but I know enough to talk to you about it. So I'm going to start with the DISC assessment. So the interesting thing with DISC is that it's observable behavior. And what that means is as you talk to someone, the way they use their hands or not, are they very chatty or they're not? Some of the other things that they do, are they very task-oriented versus people-oriented? All of that is observable. And that's what DISC takes into consideration. But again, it only relates to behaviors and your emotions. So I'm going to digress for a second and talk about emotional intelligence. And for those who don't know what that means is if you have high emotional intelligence, also known as EQ, that means, again, you're very self-aware of your emotions. However, you're also very good at controlling and maintaining your emotions. You might be aware that you're a hothead, but if you can't control those, that's not a good thing. The other thing is people with high EQs also, again, are very socially aware of others and the way that they act and the way they control and maintain their emotions. So DISC gets involved in that in the sense of kind of explaining a little bit about the way we act. So DISC answers the question, how we behave, okay? We're not getting into motivation. Motivation is why you behave a certain way. So in the case, let's say Suzanne is motivated by, let's say, money, or, Christine is motivated by power, or Kim is motivated by saving the world. That's the why. DISC answers the how. This is how I behave. This is how the other person behaves, and we're going to have a better relationship. The other thing is DISC is a neutral language. And what that means is that it has nothing to do with gender, age, occupation, none of that. It's neutral in that respect. Two people who are in complete, you could have a male and a female in two very different industries and two very different functions with very different backgrounds. They could still have the same DISC behavioral styles. So that's why it's neutral. So again, it's how we act, react, or function in a particular way. The other thing with DISC is it does not measure a person's intelligence. There's other types of assessments that do that. It doesn't talk about a person's values. It may come into play on how you act is based off of your values, but it's not an indicator of what your values are. Again, it doesn't measure your skills or experience, and it has nothing to do with your education and training. The nice thing about DISC, which I like, is that you can set goals to it, and then it can change. So let me explain what the DISC looks like. It's 4 words in a box. You answer the question either what's most like you or what's least like you. And depending, there's various DISCs out there. The one that I'm actually a DISC seller. The one that I sell has 2 graphs. And the first graph is what they call your natural graph, the way you are at home. And that graph rarely changes. The other graph is what they call the adaptive graph or the mass graph. It's also known as the work graph. And if you think about it, a lot of people go to work, they wear a mask. So that's why it's called that. So as I said, there's 4 words in a box. You pick the word that's least like you and the word that's most like you. The word that's least like you actually creates your natural graph. And the word that you pick as most creates your adaptive graph. And the reason for that is, which a lot of people don't understand, is that we're actually more passionate about something we don't like. We're more passionate about what we don't like than what we do like. So Kim, as an example, tell me a food you do not like.
Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. So if I say to Kim, let's go out for dinner, and let's say we want to go to Plant City as an example, she said, that's fine, but I'm not getting the Brussels sprouts special. I'm like, okay, well, what if there's a corn special or a pea special or a salad? She's like, yeah, sure. So we are very much more passionate about what we don't like. And so that creates that natural graph. your home graph. And that rarely changes, as I said. So about setting goals, if your adaptive or work graph says that you're very introverted and task oriented, and you want to, have more of a voice at the table, as I call it, versus a voice on the wall, you might set some goals like taking public speaking classes or volunteering to be the presenter in a team meeting or whatever. And you could take the disc every 9 months. So you could see if that changed. So I'll give you an example. Almost 30 years ago, I started my search firm. So I'm coming up on my 30th anniversary. And a friend of mine was doing DISC, and I took it back then. And one of my letters was like off the charts. I was extroverted and task oriented. And then many years later, I know you could take it every 9 months, but I hadn't taken it in years. When I got certified, that's when I took it again. And my D, that's the extroverted and task oriented, had dropped a bit, and my I went up. So I was still an extrovert, but now I was very people oriented. And it really did indicate the way my businesses have shifted. Because when I first started the companies, I was very competitive, wanted to get every single piece of business I could, would knock down people to do it, whatever. But as I got more comfortable, and also as I got into more like corporate trainings and, professional coaching, I wanted to be much more people oriented. So you can visually see it, which is really kind of cool. So here's just a diagram of some of the things about DISC. So DISC actually is an acronym. The D stands for dominance. So a lot of people that fall into the D category are, as I said, very competitive. They're very direct. They are extroverts, and they're task oriented. So I love using Disney characters because I think we can all relate to them. One of the Disney characters that fits into this is Mufasa from The Lion King. And if you think about it, he ran his kingdom, no one messed with him. Well, his brother tried to, but in general, he was very, he controlled things. The I, which is what I am now, is influential or influence. And I's tend to be very creative. They tend to be very chatty. They're very engaging in a lot of ways. One of the downsides to an I, though, is because they're so engaging and people-oriented, they can be very disorganized. Not necessarily on paper or in a room, but in their heads. I have to be very careful that I don't digress too many times when I'm talking to someone, because I can do that. A perfect example of that is Ariel from The Little Mermaid. If you remember, she swims around the ocean, and she knows everyone, and she knows things about them, and she's very focused on each and every relationship she has. The S stands for steady. And the nice thing with those types of people is that they will support you 100%. They're very loyal, very sincere. They'll follow you to the ends of the earth. And a great example of that is Winnie the Pooh. He was always loyal to all his friends in the 100-acre woods. But those types of people, you do want on your team, because they're the ones who are going to kind of keep everybody else in line in terms of, stability. So when there's chaos, they are that tend to be the calm ones. And then the last one, the C, is compliant. And these are the people that, dot the I's, cross the T's, are very conscientious. They are very accurate, so a person that fits into that category or character is Jiminy Cricket. And if you remember, Jiminy was trying to get Pinocchio to be a real boy. And so he was always making sure Pinocchio stayed on the straight and narrow. Not that he always did, but that was Jiminy's role. And so you have opposites. So in my case, as being a high I, my opposite is the C. So I'm extroverted and people oriented. C's are introverted and task oriented. So it's always interesting. Like my younger son actually is a C. And again, I realize, why he acts the way he does and behaves in certain ways, and how I know I can tick him off and how he can tick me off, and how we get along sometimes very, very well. So it's always interesting, again, not only to see these things in how we behave, but again, how others behave. Any questions about the DISC assessment? You can
Oh, it's
get
really
passionate about it.
it's
Oh,
fascinating.
Iswani, I didn't know you were coming up. Hi there. How are you?
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Just came in a little late. I was coming from an appointment.
No problem. Nice to have you.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it explained in this way. So thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Well, the next one is Myers-Briggs. And again, I am not a Myers-Briggs expert, but I have taken the Myers-Briggs and I do know a lot about it. A lot of people also know it as MBTI. And if you know anything about Carl Jung, I mean, he goes back, I can't remember how many years, as Wani might know better than me. But, you know, he had different psychological types and he put everyone into a certain type. And so the thing is that we have 4 categories, and I'll show you a diagram in a minute, of you're either this or you're that, you're this or that. So in this case, it's, you know, the way we handle energy, the way we are aware and deal with information, how we come to conclusions, and how we decide. So the thing with the Myers-Briggs and why I'm not as big a fan, I'm not trying to be negative here, is that you get 4 letters. Now it's very easy to remember one letter, like with the disc, right? I'm a D, you're an I, you're this, you're that, right? I still to this day can barely remember what my 4 letters are. Now, again, this is the same one that my son took. So I had to go up to my office to look because I could not remember my 4 letters. The other thing is about the Myers-Briggs is that the 4 letters rarely change unless some life-changing event happens. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But the thing with the Myers-Briggs is that some people say it tells you more about yourself versus the disc. So they're saying that like your personality, and some people, it was funny, as I was researching this some more, they were saying that a lot of people don't like the Myers-Briggs because they feel like, as I said, that it doesn't change, that, you know, there's a good chance your personality is unlikely to change, that it's fixed. So you can argue with, you know, people on that. Now, again, the Myers-Briggs has nothing to do with your intelligence. It has nothing to do with your skills and experience, but it's not like with the disc, there is a bit of a range. So you could be a high D and then maybe a small I. So you can get that second letter. You could have, and these are charts on the disc. So they're like graphs. So you can be very, very high or low, but you can, it can move around, meaning there's a range. Myers-Briggs is those 4 letters, that's it. No range in there. Okay. So you can't move around in it. So I think personally, it's harder in terms of setting goals and seeing if you're changing with that, because, you know, in Myers-Briggs case, you really can't. So it's very hard to change. So here's the different fields you can be in. The one commonality between DISC and Myers-Briggs is both will tell you if you're an extrovert or an introvert, but that's as far as it goes. It doesn't go any further than that. The rest of it, as I said, is a continuum in terms of the way you feel, the way you act, the way you gather information and all of that. So once you're labeled, that's it. So it's hard in that respect because, you know, as I said, you may disagree or you may feel like you're kind of like in between, but the Myers-Briggs will put you only in one category. And I know this is hard to read, but as an example, I think I'm an ESTP. So I'm extroverted, you know, I'm an excitement seeker. I never feel more alive than when I'm talking, you know, to people, a great negotiations on the front end, things along those lines. And I think that does fit, but, you know, people change over time. And if you don't go through some life-changing event, usually it's something significant like a death in the family or divorce or something like that. But it could be something even as like having a baby, maybe making a significant change, meaning like you've had a corporate job, you go become an entrepreneur, things along those lines. But in general, I would say about 95% of the people, once you get your 4 letters, it rarely changes. So here's just a couple of differences between the two that I wanted to point out. Also, the thing with DISC is it's only 20 to 30 questions. It's not that long. It takes you about 20 minutes versus Myers-Briggs is almost triple that, if not more. I think that's why DISC is gaining in popularity. I actually Googled to see what were the top ones. Both get on there, but DISC is definitely higher than Myers-Briggs. DISC has not been around as long as Myers-Briggs, partly because Carl Jung was around a long time ago. Again, DISC answers the question, how we behave. And I can't stress that enough. Versus Myers-Briggs, takes in the how to some extent, but it's the way we think and deal with information internally. So, how we feel about things, how we gather the information, all of that. DISC does not deal with that. So DISC is not a personality test. I always cringe when people say, oh, I'm going to take the DISC personality test. No, you're not. You're taking a behavioral assessment. It's about your behaviors versus personality inventory. And as you saw from that chart, it really isn't personality inventory, right? It's looking at all the different facets of your personality. As I said before, it's very easy to recall your type on DISC, and you can take it again every 9 months. Some people feel with the Myers-Briggs that you have to take it multiple times. I'm not really sure that really matters because in most cases it doesn't change. But again, if you go through some life event, yes, it may change. But the other thing is that DISC is really good for, they're both can be used in team building, but with the DISC, again, as you're looking to hire people, even if you're missing, like, let's say you're missing S's, you don't have any S's on your team, you may recruit for that. It's a lot harder with 16 boxes to try to figure out who you should be recruiting and maybe, or what. All right. I know I'm kind of going through this fast, but until you take these things, it's kind of hard in ways to understand all the nuances of them. Are there any questions between the two? No?
No.
No.
No, again, it's very, I've done Myers-Briggs, but that's a while ago, and I haven't really done DISC, but I just looking at it and comparing it. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, good. You're welcome. So the last one that I want to talk in depth about is the 360-degree feedback. So a lot of people just shorten and say, oh yeah, you're doing a 360. But it's also known as a multi-rater. And what that means is that, others, multiple people are rating your performance. So this could be, your supervisors, your peers, your direct reports. It could also be, sometimes it's rare that this happens, but sometimes they'll bring in, like if you work closely with like consultants or a consulting team or vendors, they may bring in other stuff. I have taken this a long time ago, and I'm self-employed, so I was using some of the contractors that I use just to be able to take it. This is when I was in coaching school. And the thing is that although it's anonymous, let's be honest about it, you start to try to pick these things apart. You're like, well, who gave me that low rating on this? And who did that? And, and again, it's perception. So my perception of the way I work may be very different from Eswani's. So she rates me low on engagement, for argument's sake. And, so these are kind of hard sometimes because people can get very curious. I wonder who put me as a 2 versus a 10. Oh, it must be Eswani. It's just like either. She's very jealous of me. So there's a lot of other things that come into this. So you really do want to make sure that, first of all, you ask a lot of people, but then again, it's very time consuming in that respect to go through all the data. Again, it is about self-awareness. People surveyed are going to talk about your strengths and areas that you need to improve upon. But again, it's from their perspective, not your perspective. So the way they view report writing, for argument's sake, maybe they're the type that likes bullets and you tend to write in paragraphs. So when you're getting asked questions about that, they may see it in a different light than you do. One plus to this, though, which I thought was good, is remember the other two have nothing to do with your skills and your intelligence. This one actually identifies training gaps. So if 10 of you, did a rating on me and it came out that, she should maybe take some organizational classes or something, or, I get rated low on that, then that might be an opportunity for me to get some training. because this can change over time. This one also can change over time, but how often are you going to do this? Usually once a year. And I'll tell you a quick story. So again, as I mentioned, I'm an executive recruiter, but one of the firms I was working with asked me to do a multi-rater like this. So I actually created it, and I put in my own questions, and they had a scale, and then I tabulated. But two people I knew had rated this, it was the CEO, rated the CEO very, very low. So we took it to another level, because with these 360s, you can actually just do interviews versus like an actual like online assessment or fill in the blanks or whatever. So I actually was asked to talk to these two people, and you could definitely tell that there was an ulterior motive. One of them actually wanted to be the CEO and didn't get it, obviously. And the other one had their chip on their shoulder about something else. And, I'm here, the neutral third party. So I'm trying to like take all this in. So again, there might be other reasons why people rate people low. The other thing is that, and this was pointed out by my business advisor, like we were talking about, like when I do a training and then there's a survey, and let's say it's 1 to 5. And, a lot of people give me a 4, and I get all upset that I didn't get a 5. He goes, I never give anyone a 5. I said, well, why is that? He said, because I always feel we can improve upon what you do. So a 4 is really good. There's no doubt about it. But when he explained it to me in that way, I said, you're right. Because even the best speakers, think about all the best trainers and speakers you've ever had, they can always go to another level. So that's why he rates people on a scale of 5. He only gives them a 4. He will not give out 5s. They say that it's supposed to boost employees' morale. But I think it can go the other way too, in the sense that, again, if someone gets a lot of 2s and 3s versus 5s and doesn't understand the reason behind it, because you're not getting the reason, it's just a rating. So sometimes that can go alternate. So I tend to disagree with that last bullet, but on the flip side, it could. If everyone thinks that, Christina's doing an awesome job and she gets 4s and 5s, of course, that's going to boost her morale, but you have to kind of figure out which way it goes. So here's just a little bit more about it. So some of the managers do it to kind of, ferret out just the negative. And again, we all have areas we need to improve upon, but to sit there and focus totally on the negative is not a good idea. I'm actually doing trainings right now in performance management, and yesterday's trainings with the managers was on annual reviews. And yes, a lot of times when we get feedback, it's usually negative. And that's why we cringe when we hear the word feedback. So I always say to people, don't think of it as positive or negative, think of it as constructive or critical feedback. So if people are using these 360s just to find all the black spots on your report, that's not a good thing. You want to have the balance of good versus bad, because if you only focus on the negative, that could actually reduce morale. Some people try to overthink it, which again, even with the DISC assessment, this bank that I'm working with right now, I was actually sending out DISC assessment links this morning. I told them not to overthink it. Like, don't try to think, what should I say here, right? So some people do really think they are trying to make it so that, they may even want to make like their buddies look good and people they don't like so much look bad. So, sometimes people kind of finagle that way. The other thing is, it is a time-consuming process, just by looking at all the different responses. I think it was 10 people I had to do for the CEO. And granted, I created the 360. But even then, just going through, trying to understand, where it is, like what is the fine, you have to tabulate everything. And a lot of these can be done online. So, but it's still a time-consuming process, because if you do one that's actually all interviews, that's 10 interviews, in half an hour to an hour, you're looking at 5 to 10 hours. If they do it online, that's fine. But then again, someone still has to process the responses. And then the last is it can provide biased opinions, which I already said before. So it's one of these things that, the people who give it, really you hope that they're authentic and they're honest, but they could be having a bad day. Or maybe, as Wani looked at me sideways and I thought, oh my goodness, what did I do to her? And I'm all upset with her. And now I got to do a 360 on her. So we're not always in the right frame of mind is what I'm saying when we do these raters. So is the feedback really accurate? So none of these assessments, I'm going to be honest, are 100% foolproof or 100% the way you want them. So you have to take it kind of all in together. All right, any question on this, on 360s? So for most of you, you probably wouldn't be doing this. Just, you usually have to be in a company. Maybe Aswani might be in her department or something like that. But if you're like a sole practitioner or small company, the chances you're going to do a multi-rater are kind of slim to none. Did you want to say something, Aswani?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I've heard about it in like you mentioned in big organizations, and I've heard about only about the positive part about it. How you get to be graded by your peers, and how is good for you and all that stuff. But I also like that you brought the other part of it to think about the biases and the opinions and all the stuff that that comes into it, because it does make a difference as well. But I guess my question is, now that I'm talking it through, I actually have a question. It's like, then what do you do? Because again, people rave about this. What do you do to be able to get rid of, or to like determine how like the opinion, people's opinion, and all that? Like, you see what I'm trying to ask?
Yep. No, I know exactly. It's funny you say it that way too, because I was doing work a long time ago for one of the major banks, one of the top 5 banks in the country. And they wanted to promote this woman, they wanted to hire this person in to be a senior VP role. And they actually did the 360, well, not a 360, but they would have the candidate sit down with a psychologist and do one of those types of assessments, like a 3 to 4 hour assessment. And our candidate had glowing, the psychologist couldn't say anything better. But then there was like this one tiny little thing. And the hiring manager, she was an EVP, jumped on it. And that was like the only thing she focused on. I mean, pages of how great this guy was. And she focused on that one little thing. The other thing that happens too is unconscious bias. Mm-hmm. And we, as much to say we are not biased, we are. You walk into like Walmart and you see someone dressed a certain way, right? You automatically think something about this person. Or if, Kim and I are walking down the streets of Providence late at night and 5 big guys walk by us, we get a little nervous, or at least I do. And they could be, absolutely innocent, but we do get nervous. I was in Saks Fifth Avenue a long time ago. I'm a native New Yorker, and this young girl was talking to her father. She's probably 13 or 14. And she said, I don't understand why these people are in here. They can't afford this stuff. Why are they in here? And the father very calmly explained to her that you don't know who these people are. And I was thinking about it later, that like celebrities, and you see them in Manhattan, but they try to not be so obvious. So they do tend to dress down or not wear makeup, whatever. But she was very, this was the way she saw life, is that these people couldn't afford clothes or accessories or whatever at Saks Fifth Avenue, right? So we all do have biases. And again, that goes back to our perception, and it goes to our backstory too. You may not like a certain group of people for whatever reason. And, this person you have to rate now, and you stereotype them and then you give them a rating, or maybe you don't know them that well. Just because you're in a department with someone, you may not know them as well as others do. So it's very hard sometimes to actually be, give authentic rating. And sometimes it's not even your own fault for that reason, because of the fact you may just not know the person that well, but now you're forced to do this, this multi-rater. All right, so a few others I just want to mention because they do come up. Strength Finders. It used to be a book. I think you can still get the book version. And what you do is you actually read the book, and then at the end there's a code, but I think now you can do it online. And the thing is that, again, with any of these assessments, you get it, you do it, you read it, but do you go back to it, And I'll be honest with you, I until I did this, I haven't looked at this for quite some time. But again, we may be blind to some of our strengths. I was at a women's meeting one day, networking thing, and we were talking about our superpowers. I do a workshop called The Science of Being a Superhero. And then they had to do like little like write up a little blurb about themselves. And this one woman, she got up, she was a financial advisor, and she got up and said what her was. And I said, to be honest with you, I think it's pretty vanilla. I said, I would like you to go back to others that know you and, you know, recreate it. And by the time I got back to my office, she had talked to 3 of her colleagues and had rewritten the whole thing. She was very motivated to do it. So sometimes we are blind to even our own strengths. We know our weaknesses, but sometimes we're blind to our strengths. So that's a good book or good online. The predictive index is okay, in my opinion. I actually just took it. Someone asked me to take it. And it's a much smaller assessment, like the DISC assessment, you get quite a report and all of that. I think for someone who might not be, if someone doesn't walk you through the predictive index, I think it's hard to understand it on your own. So I think you need someone to, you know, needless to say, people take DISC and then I coach them, but you can still read the DISC report and understand it. I think with predictive index, I don't think it's as clear as, you know, you need someone to walk you through it. The Enneagram is a kind of a newer one that's come out, as far as I know. I have not taken this, but someone else raved about it. And when I did Google like the top ones, this one came out. And I think you like are assigned an animal or something like that. And you know, but again, it's just a way to categorize yourself and do it. The only thing I don't like about it is when I looked into it, all of a sudden they sent me like 1 million emails. So and I think it's free. I think that one you can go online and you can get that for free. And then the last one, the Berkman method. I used to work for an outplacement firm. So people that have lost their jobs and they use the Berkman. So that sometimes helps you give some clarity to maybe the next type of job you want or things along those lines. It doesn't necessarily tell you your strengths or your all that, but it kind of maybe say, hey, if you know, with this, maybe you should think about this. So it just kind of reiterates the different types of you know, maybe occupations or things along those lines that might help you. But again, all right, so let me just go to my last slide here. So one thing I want you to keep in mind is that you should read your assessment periodically, or even when the first time you read it, you know, take notes, write down your feelings. How do you feel about this? You know, for argument's sake, if I got my DISC assessment and it said that I was a C, I'd be like, how am I an introvert, right? And how am I that, you know, dot the I's, cross the T type person? And as I said, you can get 2 letters. You could be like a large, you know, a high D and then maybe a small I or something. And I always make all my students take this because they find it very helpful. And one person did have like an I and then a small C. And they're like, how is that possible? You know, I'm not 2 people. And I said, well, when you're in the classroom, you tend to talk a lot, which is great. You raise your hand, you're, you know, always involved and everything. I said, but do you like downtime sometimes when you're back in your dorm room or at home? And they're like, yeah, I love to read with a book and just kind of be left alone and all of that. So they need that downtime. So that's where the little C comes into play. The other thing with this is that, again, this is about awareness, all of this. So I encourage you to take some of these assessments because, again, the more you're aware of how you behave, the better you can interact with others. I've had people take the DISC assessment and go back to their significant other, and they've had quite the interesting conversations on why they butt heads in some cases and why they get along really, really well. You know, you have to keep in mind too, both with the DISC and the Myers-Briggs, it talks about extroversion and introversion. You know, the big differences between the two is extroverts get their energy from others. That's why they're having a tough time with this pandemic right now. They need to be around others. They talk with their hands. They talk a lot. Hello. And the other thing is that they don't like silence. Silence makes them very, very nervous. Versus introverts get a bad rep because a lot of people will tell you that introverts are shy. I know some extroverts that can be shy at times too, depending on the situation. The big difference is that introverts need time to process information. So some of you may walk away from this and really have to sit down and really think through what I said. So that's why maybe you're not asking questions or not responding, right? So when you're talking to an introvert, as an example, I need to pause. So back in the old days, I worked for KPMG and my boss, Charlie, was quite the introvert. And I learned very quickly that if I bounced from topic to topic to topic, his head was like, whoo. So I would have to stop what I'm saying and say, Charlie, are we done with this topic? Can I move on? And if he said yes, we'd move on. If he said no, we'd talk about it some more. So, and I may have to ask this question 5 or 6 times, depending on how many topics and how long the meeting is. So the whole point is not only being aware of my actions and my behaviors and the others, but how can I maybe adjust a bit so I can have a better relationship and communicate better with others. And that's what I learned with Charlie. So that's some of the, the assessments do bring out things that, we do need to reflect on. And a lot of times we read it and we don't really reflect, and we need that time, both extroverts and introverts. The other thing is that people have taken whatever assessment is, not necessarily the multi-rater, but the Myers-Briggs or the DISC, or even, like a Strength Finders, and they'll go back to other people they work with or they live with, and they talk about, do you agree? I might not agree about this particular part. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? And again, they may see things in you that you don't necessarily see in yourself, or better yet, you are blinded by it. So you're not seeing it. So again, it's great for conversations, definitely about it. For those that are in companies, review your performance reports. When you looked at your performance reports before, you looked at it this way. Now that you've had some assessments and you're understanding better about your behaviors, look at the performance reports again. Oh, that's why my boss did that. Tom was mad about that, but you know what? Now I get why they said this, or whatever it may be. Or wow, now I understand why they think I'm really good at this. And then the last thing I will suggest to you, regardless if you don't take any assessments, or even if you do, I think creating a SWOT analysis about yourself, we do it for people who are in business. So SWOT is, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Or as I said before, how to improve upon yourself. What are your opportunities? A lot of times when we sit down and can see in black and white, either we've written it or we've seen it in assessment, and evaluate our strengths and our areas of weakness, we discover that there might be opportunities that we have not thought about before. So as I said, I was an executive recruiter, I still am, although I don't do much of it anymore. But one of the things I realized is that I really like corporate training, and that's why I do what I do. But then there's also threats too. I'll be the first to admit, I get very nervous sometimes when I'm doing presentations. So to me, that's a bit of a threat, but that's within me, right? So sitting down and doing a SWOT analysis, you do it, as I said, if you're an entrepreneur, you do it for your business, but maybe doing it for yourself. And that's the other thing, is if you are an entrepreneur and looking to start a business, or you have a business, you really do need to understand better how you behave, because you could be gaining customers, or more importantly, you could be losing customers by the way you behave. If Eswani turns down and says, well, Beth, yeah, that's nice that, that's great. We talked about your coaching services, but I'm not interested, and I lose it. Not only is she not going to be a customer, but she's not going to refer me. If anything, she's going to tell people, get away from her. So you need to, again, really think about, who am I today? How can I change? How can I have better relationships with these people? And that's why assessments can be very helpful. So I know I've said a lot in a short period of time, but are there any questions or comments or concerns? Has this been helpful?
The SWOT analysis. I like the SWOT analysis. I like everything, like the reflection and the SWOT analysis aspect of it, because that's, I taught a class a little while ago that I actually, talked about creating a SWOT analysis like on yourself, and that class was interesting because people never thought about it. People always, like you said, we will always create one for our businesses and everything, but not on yourself. And even every so often when I mention it in my classes, students, there's this like, oh yeah, we can do that. And so I use things that they're kind of used to, I'm like, threats, sometimes like debts that you're in could be a threat. So, kind of using things that they know as a way to kind of fill that boxes initially for them so that they can see it. Very interesting. Thank you. And of course, reflection. One of my favorite tools, favorite tools is, importance of reflection, and, in anything that you do. So thanks.
Great. Anybody else have questions? Suzanne, I see you unmuting yourself.
Yes. I have a question. How do you sell this to people who may not be willing to do it when maybe you're in a more volunteer capacity?
I mean, how do you get them to take an assessment? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like how do you get them to absorb, like sign on to the whole concept, right? And not be like, oh God, why do we have to do this? You know?
Well, I think, I don't know. As I said, I love DISC. And when I explain to people about DISC, I mean, I've gone out on a Friday night with friends and talked about DISC. And because I'm so excited about it, they get excited and then they're like, oh, I want to take it. I think if you put it in a way that, again, that self-awareness is one of the most important things to succeed. Whatever your definition of success is, it's not necessarily money and promotions, but if you want to succeed and have a fulfilling life, that's probably success, as in a fulfilling life, you need to be much more self-aware, because some of the behaviors you have could be negatively affecting your relationships, or maybe you have a really good relationship with someone, but you can take it to another level. So I think trying to build up that momentum and I went to this workshop today, and I realized that, this would be so cool for all of us to do and get to know each other, and all of that. And you could do all kinds of activities with this too. At least with DISC, I do all kinds of fun activities. I actually did it for a department in the state of Rhode Island. And, I think at first people were very skeptical. And then when we got in there and talked about it, and they got excited. And I remember during break, one of the men came up to me and was like, oh, I was really kind of negative about this whole thing, but I'm so glad we did this. I can't wait to go home and talk to my wife about it. So I think trying to build the excitement and the value of it. That's why I said DISC is 20 minutes. So it's not a lot of time out of your life, but it can make a huge impact. I hope that helps, Suzanne.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right, so this is just a little bit about me. You can always reach out to me if you have more questions or something maybe you didn't think about before. The other thing is that I do blog series, and on my website, you'll find all my blog series. I'm a big fan of ABC blogs. So I have the ABCs of team building, the ABCs of leadership, and my newest one is the ABCs of career journey. Each are 26 blogs. So it's not just 3, it's 26. And I haven't started a new series yet, but love to hear feedback. There's also, because it's all women on this call, I will tell you, there is a shorter blog version. It's the ABC 123 of women in leadership that you might find interesting. So, love to hear feedback. If you know of any organizations that are interested in, doing assessments and coaching or training, let me know. But as I said, I think it's really valuable. And even myself, for what I do for a living, I am still becoming more and more self-aware of how I behave. And I think it's made me a happier person. And I think that's really, if you can, again, Suzanne, position it that way, I think it could be very valuable. So thank you all for letting me have some time and seeing all of you today.
Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you so much for your time. And I really look forward to hopefully everyone taking this information and raising awareness and taking relationships to the next level. If you have any further questions, you can direct them to either Beth Carter with her information that was listed, or you can reach out to me directly. And thank you so much. And again, everyone, have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.